Pulavinaka and welcome to For the Record. Tonight on the show, we profile the Women in Business Awards, and to speak to us about that, we have the Vice President of the Women in Business, Janita Prasad, who is also the Chief Executive of the South Pacific Stock Exchange. Also joining her on the panel is Virisila Mbuandromo, the 2014 Executive Woman of the Year, to share her experiences about winning the award. And joining me on my panel tonight is Shirian Wilson from Fiji TV. Ladies, thank you very much for joining me on the show tonight. Now, Janita, starting off with you, the WIB Awards have been quite a success over the years, and it's continued to grow year on year. This time around, the organizers are trying to make it coincide with International Women's Day as well. What's the focus for 2015?
Our actual theme for 2015 awards is rewarding women, revolutionizing business. So very much in line with what women in business generally is about. And you're right, we actually have been running this for the last 3 years under Women in Business umbrella, and every year it has grown. So in terms of applications, in terms of the awareness for what Women in Business does and the awards itself. And yeah, it has actually been quite good. We had more than around 70 applications received, and this was the first year we also have one additional category. So in addition to the Businesswoman of the Year, Executive Woman of the Year, and Aspiring Entrepreneur, we also have the Manager of the Year this year.
Viri, you won the Executive Woman of the Year Award 2014. What made you decide to enter into the awards in the first place?
I think what really motivated me was I was invited to a Women in Business lunch around this time last year, I think, and I heard Janita and Nurbano talk about the fact that women, there's a lot of good business people out there, and a lot of them are women, but unfortunately women are quite shy about showing off their skills and their expertise, and they really don't participate in this sort of events. So I was kind of motivated by that, but also for me, I decided to participate because I was coming to the end of my career, and I really saw this as an opportunity. I mean, it was also a bit self-serving. I saw this as an opportunity to leverage into my next career move, and I felt that. Coming from the civil society sector, you're associating executives and those who work in NGOs. Those are two things you don't necessarily associate with each other. And so I felt it was really important that society recognizes that those of us who work in civil society in decision-making positions, we have the same kind of accountabilities that those who are in private sector have. We're accountable in terms of the money that we get, that we're entrusted with. We have to make sure that we deliver on outcomes and outputs, and we're also managing a group of people. So it's the same kind of responsibilities as someone who would be in private sector or in government has. But for some reason, for those of us who work in private sector, we're always associated with being people who volunteer and who don't really necessarily have those sort of skills. So I really also wanted to, raise that, that perception that that's not actually true, that we are just as business savvy as those who are in government or in private sector.
I'd like to pick on that a bit more later in the show, but Shirian, I'll give you the next question.
Well, as like Virisila mentioned, putting herself up for nomination, I wanted to ask about whether Women in Business, how is it going out to companies and NGOs in the private sector, getting them to nominate their women in their companies for the awards?
So what we had done after the launch in September last year, a number of information sessions. So whether it was one-on-one with companies, where we went and presented to the not just the female employees, but the management and all the employees of the organization, explaining to them what the awards were, what the criteria is, what the process will be after that. So it was either one-on-one with companies or doing general information sessions. So we had few at Holiday Inn and GPH, and morning coffee sessions as well at our secretariat at Ali's Pacific Boardroom. So pulling in crowd where people just came to find out about what the awards are. And like Virisila said, a lot of people when they heard us talk and explain that these awards could actually provide a platform for them, their business, if they're running their own business, but also for the company they're working for. If you're working for a company and you have got listed as a finalist, you are on that platform, and the branding of you in that position and the company that you work for is pretty great. So companies, employers tend to pick on that idea and say, okay, well, I've got these 3 managers who are really good. I think I'm going to nominate one of them or all 3 of them.
Virisila made the point that women are often shy about these things. Have you found that applicants do need a bit of nudging, or are
Definitely.
women stepping forward?
Yeah, they do need a push. And what we try and do is, apart from just us telling them that they should apply, we get people like Virisila. Like Virisila has spoken to the crowd we gathered in our information session earlier this year, where she shared her experience on what made her apply and how it has helped her. We've had one company, business owner, in 2013 that applied and won the Aspiring Entrepreneur, Asita, and she basically has spoken to us about how her company has started getting so much more business after winning that. She had been selected to go to New Zealand as well to do another training. So these are like great examples of going through the process, and even if they don't win, we always encourage them that even if you make it to the finalists, that's a great achievement. Even if you don't make it to the finalists, the opportunity to have 9 expert panel of judges sitting there and assessing you for what you've done so far for free, I think that's also a great opportunity, because many a times we start going on this journey without taking a step back and thinking, hold on, what have I done so far? So we are basically giving you that opportunity to just put your application in, and we will have these, and our panel of judges are quite experienced. We've got the overseer, Cindy Crook from US Embassy, and the panel of judges is headed by Mr. Mark Hallaby. And we've got a number of individuals in the panel.
All right, we'll talk more about that in a bit, but right now we will take a short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. We're talking tonight about the Women in Business Awards to be held this Saturday, and we've been talking about the judging criteria that's being used to select the candidates and shortlists. Janita, you were telling me earlier that the caliber of applications has been so impressive that the judges are having a hard time. Tell us a bit more about that. What sort of changes have you seen in the applications from 3 years ago to what you get today?
The Women in Business Executives, which I'm part of, is totally independent. We have nothing to do with the judging process or the criteria. What we had done, what we usually do for the past 3 years we have done, is select a panel of independent judges. And on top of that, we get an overseer who will make sure that the judges are doing the proper assessment and within the guidelines of conflict management and various other things. So what feedback we've got from the panel of judges is, and including the overseer, Cindy Crook from the US Embassy, is that it has been pretty difficult to select the finalists from few categories, because usually, ideally in the past few years, we've had, they will interview as many as they can in each category and then try and come with 3 finalists. So what has happened this year is, I think 2 categories they could not decide on 3. They have come back and said there are 5 finalists.
That's a good sign.
That is definitely a good sign. And the feedback we've also got from them is that the caliber of applicants this year has been quite strong. I think it has a lot to do with the event itself growing and the awareness for it improving over the last 3 years. So more people, more women are encouraged to apply, whereas, like we had said earlier, before they're more shy and say, no, it's not my thing. The most common response we get when we approach women, or we used to approach women before when to apply for these awards, was there are so many others who are far better than me, so it's not my cup of tea. I'm not going to win anyway, so why should I apply? So that is being
Priscilla, you mentioned speaking to women earlier this year about taking an interest in entering the awards. I wanted to know what was the message that you imparted to the women there when speaking to them?
I think the message that I pointed out was that, you know, generally what a lot of women say is that they're waiting for someone to nominate them. Yeah. And because they're waiting around for someone to nominate them, as a result, they just don't get nominated. Maybe because, you know, their company doesn't recognize them, or the company's just not aware that there is, an award like this. So what I was trying to say to them was that, you know, don't hang around waiting for someone to nominate you. You know, if you feel that you have contributed to the business sector, or you've contributed to the economy in a very positive way, and you can justify that, nominate yourself. I think that what I pointed out was that, you know, self-affirmation is just as important as getting affirmation from your peers. Too often we are dependent on what other people think of us. But I think it's really important to think, you know, positively of yourself. I think that's the most important thing, and that's the kind of message that that I was trying to impart onto women. And, you know, and I'm hoping that I got some really positive feedback, because, you know, when I was talking about it, I was thinking, oh my God, I sound quite self-serving. But afterwards, I had a lot of women come up to me and they said to me, you know, that's actually how we really felt, and we feel that that's the reason why we don't apply. And they felt that, you know, that what I said was true, and that they would apply this. And actually, I know 2 people who actually applied on that day that I had the lunch, that we had the lunch. So, you know, that's really positive. That kind of feedback, yeah.
When you the last year when you applied and won, you were the then executive director at the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. Given that the organization, that NGO, is heavily involved in women's issues, women's rights issues, did that also influence your decision to get involved, not just on a personal level, but on an organization to organization level?
Definitely. I mean, this is something that I had a conversation with women in business about, was that I was not only interested in being part of women in business as an individual, but I really saw opportunities in terms of how women in business and the Fiji Women's Rights Movement could work together, because we're doing basically the same thing. We're trying to empower and increase the participation of women in the economy, but also, I mean, in society in general. But you have to admit that there are 2 sectors where women are not so greatly represented. One is the economy, and particularly in the higher decision-making positions, and the other is obviously in Parliament, right?
You just stole my question. Carry on.
Yeah, so I mean, so those are the 2 critical areas, and these are areas where the Fiji Women's Rights Movement works very heavily in, is around the parliamentarian. This is where legislation is set. It's legislation that creates opportunities in the business sector, where affirmative action, where women can participate in those sectors. So, you know, this is a win-win situation for both women in business and the Fiji Women's Rights Movement, or the women's movement in whole, actually.
Coming back to the point of representation or lack of, we're not in an era now where women are told that your place is in the house, or you don't have to go out and work, you look after the family. I would say we're not in that era now, but is that a true reflection on my part, because I'm a man?
Well, I wouldn't say my place is in the kitchen, because I don't know how to cook.
But do you get that sense? Do you get that sense?
Yeah, I think it is definitely changing, and not so much for the previous generation, but this current generation, the working class. We always see cases where, you know, there's not so much of women taking all the caring responsibilities for home and in-laws or parents and children. It is always shared. So all the responsibilities for home is being shared, because if both are earning and both have full-time jobs, then and sometimes women will actually have a better job and a better pay. So even men, it's becoming more heard of that men are going on paternity leave just to take care of children, babies, newborn babies, while the mothers are coming back to work. Which we never heard of that before.
Just a follow-up question to that. I note, because of the situation at home, there's a lot more women that are getting into small business, doing business from home, is there an opportunity or an award for them in terms of the Women in Business Awards? Smaller women in smaller businesses.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to pause you there. We'll take the answer to that question after the break. Stay with us, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Our guests tonight in studio are Janita Prasad, the Vice President of the Women in Business and Chief Executive of the South Pacific Stock Exchange, as well as Vesila Mbuandromo, the 2014 winner of the Executive Woman of the Year Award. Before the break, Janita, Shirian asked about recognition for small business women entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Within our categories of awards, we've got Aspiring Entrepreneur of the Year, which generally looks at us smaller business, not just smaller, but also that hasn't been up and running for too long. So we're looking at 1 to 3 years. We do not try and basically categorize what size the business should be. So it could be smaller, but what we find out through our general workshops and other work that Women in Business does is that when you start looking at micro businesses, it's very difficult to assess them in terms of what their turnover is and how actually they're doing. So what we try and do, Women in Business tries to address that through our business skills workshops. We run at least 3 or 4 business skills workshops throughout Fiji during the year, where we target those micro business women who are doing business from home, who are running village canteens or just sewing from home or baking from home or selling grog. Now, what we do is we get these women together and we do a 2-day workshop where we address topics like just drawing a simple business plan, knowing what you want. You're starting small. Where do you want it to be? And how are you accessing your market? How are you financing your business? So what options do you have? Would you be able to get money from the bank? Probably not at this stage, So what are other options that you have? We've tried to work with bodies like SPBD as well for them to come and talk to these women sometimes, pull them together if they've got similar activities in one community. The other stuff that we cover is bookkeeping. What we find usually when women are running businesses in the informal sector, just from home or which is not properly registered, what they tend to do is not have any bookkeeping. So at the end of the day, they wouldn't even realize or it'll be hard for them to understand or figure out if their business is actually making money or not, because they're running a village canteen. The nephew will come and they'll say, okay, take this packet of biscuit and go, but pay me later, forget about it. Then the son will come and then he will take another bag of flour and take it to his in-laws place. So those kind of things happen. What we try and tell them when we get them in the room, and that's very, it's becoming very popular, our business skills workshops, where women full-time are sitting there and nodding their head because we're just knowing how it's run and what they need to improve in. We say every time, even if you're catching a bus to go and deliver something or pick something for the shop, write a note. You won't have a receipt, but jot down 52 cents or 55 cents was paid for that ride. That is your business expense. But what you do in your personal should not be combined with your business. So at the end of the day, you're able to tell whether the business is actually making money or not. Many a times, they are putting in more and more money from their personal funds and think that the business is growing, but it's actually not. They're not really making a profit. So that is important.
Viri, you've sort of set the bar for your category of award, the Executive Woman of the Year. For you, what sort of aspirations and qualities would you want to see in the winner this year?
I think it's important that the person, accountability for me is really, really important. And I think that, in terms of the questions that the panel of judges ask you, they really ask you questions from the financial to, your views in terms of your business plan. And, when they're talking about your business plan, really they're talking about you as an entity, as a business, because you as an individual are also a business. So where do you see yourself in 5 years? So those sort of things. I think it's important that the person who wins, and I think that this is the kind of caliber that women in business are looking for, people who are visionary, who are strategic, who are inclusive, who are very interested in mentoring as well as supporting other women, because it's not just about the few of us. It's those few of us have a greater responsibility to try and bring more women to participate in the economic space. Just to touch on something that we raised earlier, the issue that you were talking about in terms of it's not too common for women to be, it's common now for women to be in the business sector. It's true to an extent. It's more an exception than a rule. The kind of people that we know, our circles, these are people who are involved in the business sector. But there's a lot more women who are more involved in the informal sector, is what Janita is pointing out. And these women are barely surviving. It's about survival more than about profit. And I think that kind of... there's a lot more of those women there, and there's a lot more women who are segregated in sectors where they're poorly paid, where they don't have the kind of benefits that those of us who have at this level have. When I mean at this level, I mean that those of us that work in companies or businesses that are particularly based in Suva or bigger companies. There's a lot more women who are not like that. And I think that what the great thing about this Women in Business Awards is that it not only profiles the great work that women are doing, but it also profiles those other women who are not being that we don't see, because then we're able to come to these sort of shows and talk about them. So that's one of the great things I feel that this Women in Business Awards has this capacity to amplify the kind of discrimination that women are facing within the economic sector.
Janita, has a Women in Business sort of gauged how women in business are progressing in terms of the growth of their business, from a smaller business this year to something a little bit bigger the following year, and sort of assisting them where, like you mentioned, accounting, where the needs are? What sort of assistance do you provide them to help them sustain their business?
Sure. And when it comes to our workshops, we usually try and state it as starting your business if you haven't started it, growing it, and sustaining it. So that is the 3 aims of our workshops. However, we still try and cover most of the things, and business plan, or even if you don't say business plan, just a plan for those women, and especially the micro business women who are running it in the informal sector. They need to know, if they are especially relying on this business for survival, which most of them are, they need to know how they can grow it and how they can sustain it. And having that plan is very important, because then they can start working around it. So what we do through our workshops is half day we spend with them just in little groups doing plans on what their business is about and how they can do. So then we start entering into other areas like marketing and finance. And finance, of course, is a big factor on how, for the next step, on how they will grow. Unfortunately, right now, there are not many options for that level of businesses to go into a commercial bank and get lending. We do have the Reserve Bank small business scheme guarantee that commercial banks can lend to businesses, but most of the micro businesses, what we have been advised, would fall beyond that as well. So financing is one. As far as women in business is concerned, we are trying to get that whole support system together. So right now we don't have it. To answer your question, we don't have that step by step to make it grow, and we are also finding it hard to actually be able to go back to them and see how they have done. So if somebody has attended our workshop 3 years ago, we try and keep in touch with them and try and give our details. So after the workshop, they have access to the executives on if they want to register their business as sole trader, they can call one of the executives and find out how. We've got legal people on our executive board as well, so they can, if they want legal advice, they can call. So we usually try and give them all the resources. Ideally, we would want to do it through a business research center, where people, we are doing it on a voluntary basis as well. So we've got full-time jobs and we're trying to attend to this. Ideally, we would want a funded research center where people could just come, women could just come and get that information, get that assistance, and move on and grow their business.
All right.
Also tying in microfinance with that.
Okay, we'll pick that up again soon, but it's time for another break. Welcome back once again. We're talking about the Women in Business Awards. Before the break, Janita, you were talking about having a support system where you can go back and check on how members of the WIB or women who've been assisted are doing. But 2015, you've actually introduced another category for awards. How has that come about?
Yes, the fifth category, which is not really to do with women, is the Female Employer of Choice Award. And that is for companies to apply where they feel that they are an organization where females would like to work. And so the things we will look for, and that actually is being chosen by the executives themselves. So we will go through I think we've had about 35 applicants for that. The whole thinking behind these awards was to actually get information. So one of the other questions we have always been asked is how many women are in business? How many women are in senior executive or managerial level? We don't have that information. So having that questionnaire where employers can fill out, these are senior management females, this percentage of the total employees, it's equipping us with the statistics that we don't have. So we will continue with this category. Mainly this category is driven by the fact that we need statistics. We need statistics on women owning business, but also for this awards on women in senior positions and senior management or executive roles.
Apart from the roles that these women would be playing in said organizations, what sort of environment would a company have to have?
Yeah, so what we will look at for this employer of choice for females would be, do they have flexible hours? Do they have things like gender equality in their strategies, or even if there's a mention in their meetings and the annual report message from the chairperson. We will look at things like that. Has it actually been mentioned in their policy? Is just not enough, but we'll probably even try and see if it is something that is talked about and employees aware of gender equality. We will also look at flexible hours. Like I said, women generally end up having to care for elders or children, and sometimes they would want to work from home. Does the company have equipment like the internet and laptops to allow them to work from home? Do they have females on the board of directors? And sexual harassment policies, do they have any, and have they had any cases in that area? So there are a few things. We probably will look at things like the salary gaps that usually occur. I don't think we will have enough information to actually be able to tell that it does or not, but simple questions like, if we say 2 graduates joined your company, of course there could be differences for the male and female, but is there a salary? But the difference should really be from their what they are all about. Yeah, exactly, and what maybe if they're fresh out of university, then what their GPA was and how they've done in the interview. But it should still fall within the salary band. If it's supposed to be from 15 to 18,000, then they both should fall within that salary band. Not so we will be able to ask questions around those areas to see if there's remuneration gaps existing in the company as well.
I'm just going to do a bit of reflection about everything that we've spoken about here. WIB got its prominence and recognition as an awards night for female business women, entrepreneurs and managers. But we've come to a stage where it's become an entity to give a platform for women to actually step up, step out, be recognized, and to actually grow further and to become examples, as Viri has, for others. Is that something that WIB aspires to? And this is a question for both of you.
Oh, definitely. I think apart from the awards, Edwin, I'll correct you there, like workshops is a big part of the women in business over the years. We've also done things like knowledge market and Pinktober and speed networking, where women just come in, sit in a room, and they just are taught how to go into an organization or go into a cocktail or go into a forum, and how do you introduce yourself? How do you introduce, so there are a number of those kind of activities that we do as well. So going back to your question, I think through through the executive, within the executive, the experience that we have, and with other individuals like Verisila themselves, we try and do a lot of mentoring, not in a formal way, but through all these networks and forums that we try and hold. So I think that definitely is something that Women in Business is doing beyond the awards, because but through the awards, of course, we get sponsorship, and Westpac, who is one of our major sponsors for the last 3 years, is helping us get that message across, so more women, more females are looking up to, hey, hold on, I'm running a business, or I'm a manager who can make it up to executive. So that motivational, inspirational thing is coming out of Women in Business as a general message.
Vivi, what are your reflections?
I think, as Janice pointed out, the Women in Business has provided some really practical, hands-on kind of skills building, activities. And I think that the other great thing that you guys do, particularly your lunches, they come across really informal, but it's a real opportunity for you to network. And I think that, this is one of the things that I always find that the boys' club or men do a lot better in terms of introducing or pointing people out to the right people, because they know there's a way that the person can boost their career, or they have the same interests. That's how I think people get ahead, is making those sort of connections. And those sort of I find that those lunchtime sessions that you guys have, it's an information sharing, but it's also a great opportunity to sort of mentor, to pick out people, it's like budding people up. I think that's a great thing. But I think the underlying thing that Women in Business does is, and we've talked about it, is the fact that it's not just about women participating in the economic sector, but it's also recognizing that, that our roles need to change. Because sometimes what we do is you expect women to participate in the economic sector, but they have to still go home, still have to cook the food, look after the children. So it's double the burden for the woman, right? But it's also, what Women in Business does is about reframing and making people understand that raising a family and care, the care economy, like what happens in your home, is a shared responsibility. So if you're expecting women to participate in the economic sector, you also have to expect men to be, sharing responsibility in the care sector as well. And I think that that's also what Women in Business does, because it gives us the opportunity for women, for us to come and sit and talk with each other and say, I'm actually one of the great people. I've got a husband who's a great cook, likes to clean up the house, so, he's very good at those sort of things. But then, you can talk about it to somebody else, it inspires them, they can go and have that conversation. So there's a lot more to it, and some of it is right there in front of you, but a lot of it is stuff that's going to take a long time. But I think they've already laid the kind of foundation.
All right,
for
thanks,
that.
Vivi. It's time to take another break. Coming up, our last segment for the evening. Well, Wanaka, and welcome back. Our last segment for the evening. I'll give the next question to you, Shireen.
Well, thank you. Verisila, I'd like to start with you. You mentioned earlier legislation, an enabling environment for women to start their business or sustain the business that they're already in. In terms of this sort of corporate environment, progressive policies, discriminatory policies in our own company legislations, do you think there's enough there, or more work still needs to be done by businesses or even by government in terms of getting women to get interested in the economy and invest?
I think that definitely there needs to be more done. The Employment Relations Promulgation that came out in 2007, it's a great piece of law, provided a lot of protection, provided things like having law for equal employment opportunity, equal work of value, equal pay for work of equal value, sexual harassment, maternity protection. But then there was, if you remember, like a couple of years ago, there was an amendment. So some of those protection that women workers had previously no longer applied. And in certain sectors, some of those women are no longer protected. So for example, there were certain sectors that women couldn't have that kind of, couldn't have maternity protection. Like I think some of the larger manufacturing sectors, for some reason, got exempted from this because they were trying to boost the economy. I think that was the government's rationale. But we're now in a sort of a democratic space. This really, I think this discussion needs to be opened up again. We need to be looking at maybe trying to review or amend that piece of legislation. That's actually the basis, to me, that's the basis to start from, because it caters for the hundreds of women who are employed, right? At the moment, there's very few women who actually own businesses, but there also needs to be laws to look at how we can provide affirmative action that where women can be given, because it's a space that needs to be, it needs to be narrowed, that the gap needs to be narrowed. And so we need to look at what are some of the steps that we can put in place or that can be brought about through a policy or legislation to increase the number of women in business, whether it's through credit or whether it's through there are various ways of doing it, but I think the first place to start is to have a conversation around it. And Parliament, through this, public sector committees, I think that's what they're called. This could be a place for that to start, to get some input. And so organizations like Women in Business or the Future Women's Rights Movement could go in and have an information session just to talk about what the statistics are like, and if those women were actually participating in the economy, how much better our economy would be doing. Yeah.
The sectors we've spoken about, executive level, management level, employee level, but the other side, small business owners. I know previous winners have been a woman who runs a second-hand clothing outlet. Another is a manager at a pest control company, but there are a lot more women working in the informal sector. I've seen women driving taxis. Some are working in metal shop factories and the like. Their numbers are very few, but it's growing. And what sort of representation can they have in women in business looking into the future?
We ideally would like to have a category for micro business women as well, like and even if they are doing business within the informal sector, so they don't have a registered business. But once again, like I said before, it becomes a bit difficult in assessing or differentiating one from the other if it's not very formal. So I think SPBD and a few others do have that. We will probably try and partner with another body that actually has a bigger network within that, and this is where Women in Business going forward from 2015 onwards aims to build those partnerships, whether it's Women Entrepreneurs Business Council or SPBD or FWRM. So wherever we need, I think, like Virisila earlier said, all these different bodies are trying to do one thing, which is empowerment of women, but in different ways. So there's rights, empowering them through rights. Women in Business comes in where empowering is by giving them financial independence or financial freedom so that they have that knowledge to go start their own business or work for someone with enough skills. And then there's all these other bodies that do similar things. So combining our forces and trying to achieve the ultimate empowerment for women, we'll work through these partnerships.
Do you expect there will come a day somewhere down the line where women in business will have a position in the private sector where it's the go-to body for everything to do with women in the economy?
In the commercial sector?
In the commercial sector.
Ideally we would, but once again, I said earlier that Women in Business right now is just based on voluntary hours that the 7 executives put in. There's no secretariat paid up. We do have our financial membership, even though our non-financial membership is huge, our financial membership is something that we have to also work on and get it up. So it will really come down to getting funding. We've had funding from corporate sponsors like Westpac, Digicel and so forth. A number of them have come through for specific projects, but overall New Zealand High Commission, Australian High Commission have come in to help us with the workshops. What ideally our dream for Women in Business is to have that business center so that we can have that position, that existence where we can be the go-to people. We can even have a few research people, mentors based there, or mentors that can be sourced through that research center, and a few things. It'll all come down to hopefully people listening to this show will say, yeah, this is something we would want to support and fund, and we'll have someone knocking on our doors.
Fingers crossed. Shireen?
Just my last question, in terms of looking into the future, is it just the awards night next week? We kind of come to the awards and see the same faces every year. How are you trying to build a network in terms of you're going to get all these different women to come to the awards so that it's not just the same faces every year, and that we're not addressing the needs of just a certain segment of women?
I think as far as the awards are concerned, and Priscilla pointed this out earlier as well, it's twofold. The actual event on the night is usually taken up by corporates who will buy a table for their staff to go to. So, because that's more, it's $160 a ticket. So that way it becomes a bit difficult to have a different crowd coming in. What we try and do for these awards is, through shows like this and through our articles and through all the build up to the awards, increase the awareness for the women participating in business and holding positions and progressing and to a higher position, so that women can be encouraged and inspired to do their business. But as far as the night itself is concerned, it really depends on who gets the table, who gets the tickets, who pays for the tickets, basically. What we would want to do is to make it open at a bigger venue where we can get everyone in. Once again, it is one of our dreams that we could have in the future.
All right. On that note, ladies, thank you very much for being on the show tonight. I'm glad we had such good representation on the panel, because it's Women in Business, and a week from now is International Women's Day. So I feel, to some extent, I've done my part in promoting both WIB and IWD. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that was our show tonight. Remember, for comments or questions, you can email us for the record at fbc.com.fj. That's all for tonight. We'll be back in a week's time. Good night.